To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
All right, everybody. Good morning, and welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. It is Thursday, and we're here to have a little discussion. I'd say this episode is one, brought to you by the Planter app, and two, this one's off the fly. So we're going to see how this one goes. I just asked Batavia a key question, and the question was, obviously, what is the key to a successful summer garden?
And I regret not asking for his answer before we press record.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
I mean, when I gave my 12 responses and he said, give me a singular answer.
Yeah.
I was able to come up with one. And the question will be, as we get through this hour together, will it be the same answer? So
For me,
but I'm going to ask you to think on your feet, one singular key to a successful summer garden. Make a note, mental note, and then once we get to the end of the episode, let's see.
Yeah.
If,
well, before I give you mine, and it's a really hard question. It really is, because it's one of those things where I think it's like, it's dependent on where you are, what you're growing, like all these things. And I try to narrow it down in my head about like the one thing that just really will make a difference in the garden. And I can't really come up with like one huge outlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that, so what we do as a part of this show includes folding in feedback we receive from various gardeners, new and wise, right? And that makes up what we believe the kind of garden community.
Yeah.
And their opinion is, right? So that includes y'all over on Backyard Gardens Community Garden on Facebook. So within that group, that includes both Sandy Bottom Homestead and Be Better Garden as a part of the YouTube spaces and Instagrams and all. And that includes conversations we have with gardeners that are not in the social media worlds, like real life people, right? Versus all of you that are bots. No, I joke. Of course you're not. So you look at all of those things, and a theme that we see often is, well, what's the thing? Like, how can I be successful? It's like people are looking, especially folks that are maybe new to the space, looking or had some issues previously, looking for like the key to success, the thing that I just need to do, and then all things will be well. And
yeah.
I don't think that there's a single thing.
There's not, but I think there's, obviously, I think every garden is going to have its own key, right? And your answer, which I'll get you to give it in a second, was very overarching, meaning it covered basically all aspects of this, which is, I liked it. I really did like it. And I like it for a different reason. What was your answer?
Attention.
Yeah. So I really like that because it's easy in the summer when the crops are in the ground a long time, to get kind of complacent. So if I had to say something that was a little bit more narrowed down, because attention, even though I believe is the correct answer for the record, that's not the answer people want to hear. And I think pest control is the answer that I would have. Is I have like multiple levels, but I think at the top would be pest control, because excuse me, it gets out of control very, very fast, but it folds into attention. Just like I was thinking, well, fertilizing or watering, they all fall right under attention in the garden. So I think the conversation, and you have to remember, everybody, 4 minutes ago, we decided to talk about this. So this is very organic. This is one of those episodes. It's like a fertilizer, you know. It's organic, so it takes time to flush it out. Versus our synthetic ones, where it's just like, bam, here it is. So, but in all seriousness, I think throughout this conversation, the overarching theme will be attention. I think that's really what it needs to be. Batavia and I we talk, and we used to talk a lot about, and we don't as much anymore, garden walks, you know, walking through the garden, really paying attention. And it's amazing what a couple seconds in your garden, I mean, literally a couple seconds will do for you in your garden.
Yeah, I think that there's, if you go directly to the line of pests, right? You won't know that pests are in your space unless you're paying attention and seeing either the pest or the remnants of them.
Yeah.
You know, or the destruction to a plant, right? A plant is suffering or destroyed. And I think that, you know, I'm glad that you throw back to our common references to garden walks. We're still doing them. It's just maybe just naturally we're not kind of pressing the button, you know, within every episode and multiple times like we used to. We're not drilling it in. But I think you look at something like that garden walk, and even if you don't know what to do when you're in your garden space, that garden walk will tell you something needs to be done in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
There are moments where it's like, let the thing do what it's going to do. But I believe that comes with experience.
Yeah.
Kind of knowing when to, you know, let something be. But I think that, and that's the easiest thing you're ever going to do in your garden is that garden walk and just paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, a discoloration, a wilting, a hole, something that needs to be harvested. You know, something broken, something needs to be fixed. I mean, there's a lot of paths you can take with this. That's like, yeah, that will work for me very well. I will be able to manage this and figure it out. And a lot of times, what it is you can catch something before it gets out of control. Mm-hmm. You know, you see an aphid. And then you go out 2 days later and you see 10,000 aphids, you know, and it's just kind of how it works. And it's one of those things where we just want to pay attention and be close to our garden. I mean, you almost, you know, this actually folds in a lot of different episodes we've talked about now that I'm thinking about it. So we did an episode a while back, how gardening was a lifestyle. And this is part of that lifestyle where it's like, you know, your garden's more than likely your happy place. Spend a minute in your happy place and look around. And you may see things that make you unhappy, but at least it won't ruin your day when you come out there and you're like, well, what happened, you know? And I used the analogy in a previous episode where it's like, I haven't been out in my garden in a month. Well, it's like, that's your own damn fault, you know, because in the summertime, things move really fast. Mm-hmm. And when I say things, what I mean are problems. Problems will move really fast. Your tomatoes will overgrow and fall over if you don't stake them. You'll see all those different things. And it's one of those things where it's like these small steps make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. A tomato plant as an example, a heavy wind for a tomato plant that you didn't notice needed to be staked could literally break that plant. Mm-hmm. You know, it could split the tomato plant stems, right? You know, something that tomato plant or otherwise that needs some type of support that you've not given it yet because you didn't notice that it needed it, or you didn't recognize that it would need it. You know, there have been times I've come out and a plant is kind of laying limp on the soil and it's being eaten by something because now it's in contact with that soil, you know, or even if it's in contact with the mulch, you know. I think that when you look at identifying problems, which we would have done a couple of weeks ago, an episode on pests, and it just, again, just drilling that bit back, if you don't see it, you don't know that it's a problem. You can't fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we take for granted the amount of power we have as gardeners for really, really leading to success or not. right? Like it's within you, right? And I look at something and I say, on the flip of it, when I think about kind of, it's all not paying attention so you can mitigate problems. It's also paying attention. So when someone says, how did you learn all of this? Right? There are multiple ways that I'm learning about gardening over the years, but there's a lot that I learned by just watching.
Yeah.
You know, you walk through and you know the difference between what this seedling is and what the weeds are that normally pop up in your garden.
Oh, let me tell you about that, boy. Damn. That ruined me last year, actually. I had a weed that came up that looked exactly like a corn, and so it messed me up from the, like, off Jump Street.
I know the one you're talking about. I just pulled some yesterday. I'll take a picture of it.
Yeah. No, I don't want to see it. Don't send it to me. I know what they look like. It made me mad. Yeah, and it's, you know, so attention is something that, I mean, it's the cheapest thing you can pay. You know what I mean? You can just go out there.
Come on now.
Come on, somebody.
Right.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm stepping up to the pulpit.
I refuse to believe that that's my voice.
That's
I'm going to find an
voice.
episode when I say it, and then I'm going to grab a recording. I'm going to compare it to what you just did, and I refuse to believe that they are anywhere near similar.
I like it, so it's okay. But, you know, and I think when you fold everything in, and I don't want to spend the next hour or, you know, whatever time we have talking about paying attention to the garden. I do want to talk about some of the other aspects of it. And like I said, pest control is really important, but you know, there's another thing. And for my garden in particular, so this is where you start to get into the weeds a little bit. But like I said, everybody's garden is in a different area. You may have too much shade. You may get too much sun. It may be hot. It may be cool. You know, you have all of these different aspects that you've got to factor in. And in due time, like if you're a first year gardener, you don't know yet, you know, but if you're a 10th year gardener, you know what sections of your garden need what attention and what grows better where and all this stuff and what plants may need more fertilizer. Hopefully you've kind of figured that out and you're starting to narrow that down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say even a 10-year gardener do it, because sometimes it takes a while for these concepts to sink in.
Yeah. I think that there's also just because you've gardened for 10 years or 20 years, there could be things that you're now trying to grow that you've never grown before.
Yeah.
You better believe that you are ahead of the game because you've had this much experience growing food, growing, you know, fruit, potentially growing herbs, growing flowers, right? That is transferable.
Right.
But a new crop is a new crop.
Yeah. And you basically, I don't want to say you start over at square one because you don't. You have, you know, you will accrue a base knowledge over time that you can apply to multiple things, but different plants have different issues. And I mean, I was just looking on the Backyard Gardens Community Garden Facebook page. Come join it if you want. It's free. And I was just seeing like help. What's this? What's that? Help. And that's a big thing about this time of year. I mean, nobody asks the question, hey, my plant's doing really good. What do I need to do for it? I've never seen that.
Yeah.
My plant's loaded with tomatoes. What can I do for it to keep it alive? You know, that's not a question. I mean, I think it's actually a really good question, believe it or not. You know, because it's not what can I do to keep it happy? It's what can I do to keep it going? You know, this, that, and the other. But for me, it becomes like I have multiple stages in my garden. And so right now, the problem that I'm dealing with, well, I don't want to say the problem I'm dealing with. Let me stop there. In the late spring, early summer, the number one key for success for me is going to be, honestly, feeding the plants right, because I have such a diversity, meaning I have cabbage in one area, tomatoes in another, squash here, potatoes here. Like I have all these different requirements for them that I need to meet. And so finding that happy medium is hard for me sometimes. And that's the key to get through this part of the season. And then as we get into summer, it's the heat. And then it turns, so I have multiple stages, and it can last a couple weeks each time. But, you know, the overarching, those are the things that I deal with. Because the summer season, let's face it, it's not from June 21st to
September X.
September, whatever. I mean, that's summer. Dude, we're harvesting summer plants by then. You know, it's spring and summer. Let's be real. And even into fall.
Yeah, I like the idea of, you know, so for spring going into summer, because my seasons tend to collide, even when I feel like I'm on time, which I'm not this year, but even when I feel like I'm on time, I'm kicking butt. I'm going to be early for summer planting. It is prioritizing and compartmentalizing. Making the things I need to do in the garden a priority, and then making sure that I'm able to put these things in smaller boxes to get the task done, because there's a lot of work. I've done this a handful of times, truly putting the garden to bed, you know, in the fall going into winter. And last year I did that for every space with the exception of the cage baby. And somehow, some way, I have let that monopolize the time I do spend outside. I have a feeling of what it is, but that's not for this episode. But I need to prioritize. You did the work to be prepared to hit the ground running for all of these other spaces. Take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that sometimes because of the experience with, I can do this in this time. It's, you know, the calendar is a little bit kinder when it comes to these vegetables. I use that as a little bit of a crutch. So it's not the garden, it's the gardener going from spring to summer. Once we get in that, I have to be kind of closely monitor, right, to yield success. Once we get to summer, for me, it absolutely is staying on top of watering and feeding, right? Because I have now multi-season crops in the garden space, right? I tend to plant a lot of the same things that are the same size in the same spaces. So I don't struggle as much with, they have different needs, right? You know, but it's still, because one of the goals is to have a diverse garden space. They're very different plants.
Yeah.
You know, and so especially when you combine your direct sowing some things and you're transplanting some things in, those are going to have wildly different needs, you know. So if I'm direct sowing something, I absolutely need to make sure that that soil is damp until those seedlings emerge. I need to make sure that the seedlings don't get eaten up, you know.
Yeah.
And for those that are planting a garden, I'm sure you're direct sowing some things, check out our seed shop. Links in the description. I actually ended up, based on my timing and the goal of being early, I thought I was going to start some of my direct sowable seeds indoors. But based on a number of things happening indoors, I'm like, just get those seeds in the soil.
Yeah.
Right. You know, this is the reason why we designed this particular group of seeds for, you know, the shop. Let's go ahead and get it done.
So, first thing before it leaves my head, and then I have something stupid to say. The key to a successful summer garden, here's the answer, is the gardener. You said it. It's not anything but the gardener, ultimately, because we are in control of everything, right? That's what I now truly believe, that it is up to us to be, that causes the success in the garden. And to me, that's a stupid answer. It's like, well, okay, but that doesn't tell you anything. But that's what the rest of this episode's for. 2, I never regret not doing the video portion of the podcast since we stopped. A lot of people ask, and just so you know, there wasn't enough people watching it to justify doing it, so we stopped doing it. The only time I really regret it is when you just said, I'm late planting. And I wish we had been doing it all these years, so each season I could do a clip of, we're late planting, but the next season will be better. I'm late planting, but the next season will be better. But we won't talk about that today. I just so wish I could do it.
So the imaginary, so you'd have to, there's no editing of the next season will be better. I never say that, but we won't talk about it today. Yeah, there's a whole, like, you know, you could have a sleep tape, you know, like it's 10 hours of
Batavia saying that's late. I'm late.
But we won't talk about that now.
I'm late starting my seeds, but we won't talk about that. I'm late. It's so great. I love it.
I used to work with a client years ago, and we were working on implementing a new solution. And she, you know, as a part of it, this was like a very customizable solution. And she, you know, we talked about different features, and we're like, you know, we could focus on that for phase 2. And she's like, basically, I don't do phase 2s. Phase 2s never happen. Right. You know, it's just what people say in business. And you know, we won't talk about that now. It's almost like a phase 2. Like we never circle back around to it. As in, I never circle back around to it.
Some things we just shouldn't circle back to.
Add that to your Batavia code list.
Yeah.
You know, Batavia cheat code.
My code list is very long for you, as a matter of fact. I've learned quite a few codes over the years. And the other reason why we didn't have it is because as she was talking, I was mocking her and she was flicking me off. So there's that aspect too.
Did you see the part where I literally was tapping on the screen as if you could see me tapping when you were looking down?
Yeah. So it's one of those things, though. You know, the gardener is in charge of everything, and you know, as we get it, like it's so weird to think about. We talk about cabbages and stuff like that. And they're what, 90-day, 80-day crops? 80-day crops, yeah. And then you talk about tomatoes. I mean, everything seems to run. Have you noticed this? Everything seems to run about 90 days.
Yeah, it all runs about 90 days. You have some things that are on like at 10 days.
Yeah.
Most stuff that says 75, it's probably really 90.
Yeah.
You know.
I tell you, my carrots this year are going to be about 300 days crops, but you know, whatever. I don't know what's going on there.
Ay.
But
yeah.
So, because I was going to say, you know, in the summer, the crop, and it does seem to me that they are in the ground a lot longer. You know, I've been thinking about this a little. I said it in the subscriber episode we did yesterday, and it kind of is still in my head. But it seems to me, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it seems like, you know, the peppers are in the ground 5 months. And when I say 5 months, so it's a different 5 months. So for me in the wintertime, yes, I can grow plants in the wintertime. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. It's not a very active managing season, meaning I could not go out to my garden for 2 weeks and nothing would really change in the wintertime. But if you take 2 weeks off in the summertime, and I mean, and everything's on automatic, you know, watering's automatic, so that's not an issue. Just in general, you go out there in 2 weeks, like it's crazy. It's a totally new playing field. You're going to have fruits all over the place. You're going to have pests coming out your ears. You'll have plants that have exploded in growth. You'll have plants that have died. It's a totally different beast this time of year. And it's a lot more active, and it's a lot more hands-on and quick. It's quick thinking, I think. And, you know, let's be frank, everybody. It's this garden quick. So you may have a week to make a decision. It's not like I'm gonna get my finger cut off, let me move my hand. But you know, you come up with a solution, but there is a time sensitive aspect to it.
Yeah, this happened to me this spring, but this happened last summer as well. So, you know, I was doing an opening for a video, and I captured the opening exactly how I wanted to capture it. Then I went to film the rest of the video, and the audio was so windy.
Oh, yeah.
Right, you know, and so I kept the opening, and then when I came back to it, it happened to be a couple of weeks later to pick up the video. The vegetables that were in the background of the opening compared to the size of the vegetables now when I'm actually picking up the rest of the video, they were so widely different that it's not a disclaimer, but I just put a note, like, we're a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not, your eyes aren't noticeably so. Your eyes aren't, you know, tricking you. No, it's just been that much growth. And I think that in the fall and in the spring, we've talked about this very, very briefly. Vegetables can sit in your garden much longer, kind of sit and wait for you to harvest. You know, I've referenced over the years using the garden as my refrigerator.
Yeah.
That's not what you're doing in the summer. You're really taking a risk for primarily any fruiting plant, you know, for the food to be ripe or near ripe and for you to kind of just let it hang out.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny too, because I've never had an animal steal a cabbage. You know what I mean? Like, it's never happened. But I've had, you know, tomatoes be half eaten on the plants and stuff like that. And I really do believe that the true fun in the summer garden is the harvest, because it is often. And, you know, you grow cabbage, you cut a cabbage, and you're like, okay, cool, it's done. But every day you're grabbing a tomato. It's like right now I'm grabbing blueberries every day. I'm harvesting blueberries. I got about a pound of blueberries yesterday. I was pretty cool. Yeah, I was really happy about that. The birds ate every single one last year, so that's not happening this year. And I can't shoot birds, so it's just not fair. They're just trying to live, you know what I mean? But you know, as we get into later in the summer, for me, it becomes heat. And so I'm managing heat. Now, it's interesting, and I haven't thought about this, and I'm probably going to be talking about it more. When your garden's booming, my garden's being emptied out, you know? So by the time you start harvesting your peppers, I'm getting rid of, most of my garden beds are becoming empty at that point, which is, you know, and I'm starting to put in fall plants and stuff like that. And it's managing the heat aspect of it. And that's a key portion to my success in my garden, is putting up the shade, and when I say heat is not only temperature, but it's also water in my mind, because it's, you know, the hotter it is, the more water you need to add. So it kind of it goes hand in hand. So as we get into the season and we start doing more and more of it, you start looking at it, and it becomes a weight on top of my garden that really does need to be managed correctly. But in my mind, that's when I break up the season in almost, like I said, like 3 different phases. You know, the planting phase of the spring summer garden. I'm just going to call it a summer garden, even though we've established it doesn't just happen in the summer. The planting phase and the growing phase, the harvesting phase, and then honestly, in that same season, there's going to be the replanting phase. And so there's all of that occurs. What is it for your summer garden that really, like, is something that really makes a difference? If you didn't do it, you would fail.
That's a good question. And that's a way to point down to what's the one thing, right?
It took us 27 minutes to get there.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. You know. This is like, these are the coming attractions for the episode. Yeah.
Thanks for sitting through the preview. Did y'all get popcorn and soda?
You know, as an aside, as I, with one part of my brain, try to think about what the answer is, so I'm going to stall a little bit. I absolutely need to see the coming attractions when I go to the theater.
Really?
Like, I'm secretly disappointed if I'm like going to the movies with someone and I don't get a chance to see them.
Bro, I can't afford to go to the movies, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So 27 minutes, I would sit there and love every minute of it. And I also stay at the end just in case they're outtakes, because I love outtakes.
Yeah.
So the one thing that if I didn't do, I'm going to say harvest.
That would make your garden fail if you didn't harvest?
Yeah, I think that for...
Actually, you know... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
yeah, you're... damn, that's a good point. That was a good point.
It's also our shorthand together, our collective shorthand. So when you think about the fruiting crops, I have some animal issues within my garden, and I've taken some measures to try to protect the vegetable plants from the animals, try to discourage them. But think about how much rotting fruit draws in pests, draws in animals, right? There is, you know, leaving things on the vine, we've talked about over the years, depending on the vegetables, cucumbers, beans, could actually halt the additional production for those plants, right? There is, and I don't have a way to point to it exactly in my garden, but I also believe there's a level of the impact of the health on that plant if you have things that are kind of, dropping and rotting around it. Sure, you have a chance of, something self-seeding and getting started the next year, but I don't think that that's worth it for some of these, especially fruiting crops. Think about melons, right? Cantaloupes like we have in the shop. You know when a cantaloupe is ripe because you smell it. As soon as you walk out your door, if your garden is close to your house, you're going to smell it. As soon as you're approaching that garden space, you're going to smell it. But guess who else is going to smell it?
Everything else.
Yeah. So the harvesting it, and this is a throwback to all of last year because we referenced this quite a bit. A listener commented on kind of getting stuck and watching vegetables that she thought she really should be harvesting and kind of just wasn't, right?
Yeah.
This is in the early part of the year last year. And I had that same issue, which is the reason why we talked about it throughout the year. I have it more so for those vegetables that give you that grace. But for fruiting crops, outside of peppers that I want to wait until they get to the ripened, fully ripened version of themselves, a green bell pepper, I want to wait until it gets red. That's the only thing for fruiting crops that I'm waiting on.
Yeah.
Right. I'm taking cucumbers small. If I have large or yellowing cucumbers coming out of my garden, I didn't see them.
Yeah, and I mean that's the that's the aspect of it too. I'm glad you said that because other than the pest portion, the halting of the growth is an issue because that is something that will occur inside of your and if you don't harvest on time for some of these, and again, if you go back to the cabbage, it's just a cabbage, you're not going to get another one. So it's not a big deal, but yeah, you want to keep those plants producing. And that is a good point. And I mean, a lot of times we get the question, how can I keep X animal from getting in my garden? And there's two ways: harvest your food and don't leave food laying around, and you're good. But you may have to harvest a little bit early too if you're having a problem. Yeah. Because they're gonna find out. That's the best way. Don't give them a reason to come into your garden, and you'll be good.
I used to be really nervous about picking tomatoes, but vine ripe tomatoes, you pay 30 cents more, in the grocery store for vine ripe tomatoes. That's marketing.
Yeah.
One, but two, I used to I wanted to get the best of the best out of my garden. So I would wait until they fully ripened.
Right.
And I would fight with the squirrels. This is pre-cage baby days. Well, I would fight with the squirrels over them. And this is also where I may have had one or two tomato plants back then.
Right.
Right. So now I actually feel really, really good. I did this last year all throughout the season.
How good?
Really, really good.
Okay.
Was that three really? It was three reallys originally.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it's a trifecta of reallys. And I tried it a bit 2 years ago. Last year, I really committed to it. I'm pulling tomatoes off the plant, not at the first sign of blush, but they still have firmness. They have their color, and I'm letting them ripen because there's also this bit of you're collecting these things to do something with now compared to, 7, 8, 9 years ago where it was just one more salad, cucumbers and tomatoes, right? Oh, that's my favorite UPS driver. Well, actually, my favorite UPS driver is no longer on the route. I missed my chance to shoot my shot. But this guy, this other guy, he is too fun. I'm sorry I won't be able to see him today. So you look at that thing of harvesting, and you're also, by harvesting the vegetables, there's less pressure on the plant as well.
Right.
Right. So you want that plant to be able to reach down into that soil and continue to grab those nutrients to continue to produce, right? Think about the pressure that this thing now has going into your heat. We talk about that. Do we what? I talk about it for sure.
I talked about the heat.
Yeah, with going into the heat, lighten the load for your plants.
Yeah.
Going into heavy rains, lighten the load for your plants.
Yep, that's exactly right. And it's important to think about that and to keep it in mind because every little step that you take for each plant makes it easier. And that's why it's so hard. I hate that question is what's the one thing that you can do? Because it's so difficult. One thing that I think is also really important is leave the garden alone. And it sounds counterintuitive because we're sitting here talking about, hey, pay more attention, go out there, do this, do that. but also like don't trim plants all the time. Don't move stuff all the time. Let it grow. Let a garden be a garden. Let it just do its thing and enjoy it. And you're there to collect and to intervene as needed. But there's a thing about tomatoes where everybody wants to trim the hell out of them all the time. They got to get them skizzers in there and just get to it. You know, and it's like for me, I only grow determinate tomatoes now. I trim once, and then after that, I'll take a couple suckers to propagate. There'll be a video about that soon on Sandy Bottom Homestead, because propagation is one of my favorite things to do in the garden. And then the other part is like if it's too bunched up in the middle, then I will thin it a little bit. But I don't get in there and just get to hacking away. And it's one of those things like you can do it. Your plant will live, but you're going to set it back because it's got that many leaves for a reason, unless you've put too much nitrogen to it, which I can't help you there.
I have seen the, the effects of the too much pruning. You'll see sun-scald peppers, and you'll look, and when you look closely at a picture or video, you're like, it wasn't that the plant didn't produce a lot of leaves or branches. It's like you came in and started pruning them. When you first asked me the question before we hit record, my 3-part answer was, correct me if I'm wrong, because it was off the cuff too, water, sun, and space was my answer, right?
Yeah.
It's what's the key to successful gardens. And this is the reason why we do the thing we do when it comes to kind of the badger that we have. Because I heard him say key as in singular, but you're not going to put me in a corner.
I knew you were going to say that. Tim, you were so predictable.
Don't you love me for it, right? You see me turn that thing around? You're not going to pull me down. So space is key when it comes to making sure that there's airflow, right? Making sure you're not shading out things that don't need to be shaded out. But you can overdo a lot of things in life, and pruning plants is one of them. The constant need of coming in and what did you used to say? You're injuring this plant every time you come in and prune it.
Every time. Imagine if every time you went and somebody just cut your finger every day, just a little cut, little cut, little cut. You'd look like a mess. You know what I mean? And there's always, look, y'all feel free to do that, because if you do, you can come to our seed shop and buy seeds and use the code 1million to get yourself 10% off and a free pack of seeds. So go ahead. But in all seriousness, it's very important to just let it be. And water is something that's important as well. Too little, too much. What do we do? I have a theory, and Batavia and I have talked about it a fair amount offline, and we talked about it a little bit on here. I think we underwater our gardens personally. I think that, between the use of mulches and stuff like that, I think we get overconfident in the amount of water, and we're worried about saving water. When in all reality, take a shorter shower if you want to save water. You know what I mean? You don't need a 20-minute shower. It doesn't take you that long to wash. Sometimes it's nice, but it's just interesting that we do that. And the reason why I say that is because I've had it a couple times where I've gone out of town. I get paranoid, so I set my timer. I'll water before I leave a day early. The timer will come on. I set the timer to water more often. And then we got like crazy rain while we were gone. And I came back and everything like quadrupled in size. And I came back after a week to like a monster of a garden. And it convinced me that I think we've just been underwatering our gardens as a whole, and that we should put a little bit more water to them, especially in the heat, because that's part of the heat, is adding more water. And it depends on how you water, and this one reason why I don't really recommend watering by hand, because you get uneven watering. And if you have a bigger garden, I would estimate, I mean, I've seen people do it where they're like, yeah, this is good. And they get tired towards the end of watering and they start moving faster and faster. So the first bed you water gets plenty of water. And then by the time you get to the end, you're probably underwatering a fair amount. I think that's a natural tendency. And so that's why I always recommend timers. And it just takes it out of, you don't have to worry about it. But I know for me, right now, because I'm using the drip system, I'm watering every 3 days. But when it comes to the heat of the summer, it'll be watering every other day. And that has helped me also become more successful in my garden and really push the growth. And, you're helping, not only are you getting the right amount of water to your plants, but it's also helping transport those nutrients from the soil into the roots and throughout the plant. And it just helps, and it also helps keep it cooler.
Yeah, it's Accurite. It's a little rain gauge that I've used over the years. And so Ben's going to add it to the shop, the Amazon shop. I've asked Leonard like 5 times and he's not done it.
I'll do it right now as we speak.
Well, I've thought about it 5 times and Leonard didn't read my mind.
Oh, well, that's a personal problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to make a purchase, a bucket, outside when it rains. The nice thing about the rain gauge is you can continually monitor it, and it's not like just a whole open thing of water. But I have a bucket out, a little kind of wagon. I'll look at how much rain really comes down on a day that it said it's going to rain all day. And I'm always surprised by how little comes down. Another way, without even measuring the actual water, is putting your finger in the soil to see how far you feel like that soil is damp. How far down is it damp, right? So I can generally agree with, we probably do underwater our gardens. One of the things
that's a very general statement. Yeah,
for sure. One of the things that, we rarely kind of talk about in the behind the scenes, like, how do you feel about this, is where we really differ in opinions. So I hand water almost exclusively. If I could click my heels and when I open my eyes, because my eyes were closed when I clipped my heels, there was drip irrigation installed, I supported 125%, right?
Yeah.
I've just not jumped in to say, I'm going to figure out how to do this, or I'm going to find someone to figure out. And we started off with a plane ticket for young Ben, and now it's like a road trip. So
I have to bring my whole toolbox up
until
there
he gets down here. But I say, like, we don't disagree on the idea of, hand watering. You may be underwatering it even then. I feel generally pretty good about my raised beds, about my ability to water deeply. My containers, it's sometimes left, and there's something left to be desired, when it comes to how much water they're getting. But I do think that that's a really, really big piece of success in the garden, how much or how little. I don't know how often, if the only time I've ever seen someone in recent memory that has overwatered something, it's been in a container that didn't have drainage holes.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people that overwater and water gardens otherwise, but
it's really hard to overwater a garden, though. In the summertime, I have to be very clear. In the summertime, it's very hard to overwater a garden. So, because you've got everything working against you. You've got plants using the water. You've got the heat making it evaporate. You've got the wind causing transpiration. Look, all these big words coming out. Everybody, watch out! Everybody.
Not impressed.
And and then you've just got the fact that like the water can continue to drain down. Typically, now if you have really thick soil or something out there, that may be a different story. But typically speaking, the water will go somewhere. And containers, and I mean, look, when we talk about gardening, we cover all of it. This applies to containers, in-ground beds, raised beds, vertical beds. Doesn't matter. It all is encompassing. So and I do agree with you. I've seen containers. Now, containers is a little bit different because there's multiple things working against them. It just adds a little bit of complexity. It's not that it's not a viable option by any stretch of the imagination. But, I've not seen very many overly watered beds in July.
Yeah.
Unless you're getting rain every day and your sprinklers running every day as well. And that's something that if you're watering by hand, that's a big no-no. But if you're running a timer, you just need to make sure that you delay the timer. Usually they have a delay button. It starts at a day. And every day it rains, I just go out there. If it's going to be like a gully wash, just like a big rain, I'll push the delay button for each. So if it rains 3 days in a row, each day I go out there and I'll push the delay button.
Yeah, when I've used on the occasion where I use my timer for my regular water sprinkler for the garden, same idea of it being a delay button, you know. But it kind of goes back to the idea where you opened up. Like, we're not getting in the summer 2 or 3 or 4 days of rain in a row here in Chicago.
Right.
Excuse me. So there's an argument to be made about, the regular sprinkler when it runs and the rain being fine. And these are like last year, I was out of town on one of the hottest parts of our summer, and I did a deep water before I left. And then I basically set the timer to run each day I was gone because I felt like it was going to be just that hot. Right. And all in all, I think the cucumbers may have been the only plant that suffered, but I can't say for sure if it suffered because of that, but it's quite possible. So again, I look at it like this is a place where we garden differently. This is also a time where our gardens will have very different experiences, all tying back to the weather.
Yeah.
Your hot and humidity is like, when I say, oh my gosh, whatever percentage, humidity, you're like, hold my beer in North Carolina, and that absolutely impacts things. I do want to comment on, and it took me a while personally to overcome this, being okay with, let's see how it goes, right? Not getting caught up with the, you have one chance at this. If you do this thing wrong, then the thing is going to fail. Yeah. Right. There is a lesson when things kind of don't go according to plan, but there's also, you just don't know until you try it. This is like 6 years ago. I did an unofficial experiment, where I was planting cabbage all in the summer. You hear what I'm saying? I planted cabbage like right at the very end of spring going into the summer. And I had one space that I knew was pretty shady, and the bed was crowded, and another space that for all intents and purposes, had full sun exposure and had room. And the size of those heads of cabbage were so very different. It was probably my first experience with, what was it, 18th century doorknob style cabbage.
Yeah.
This is my confession. I never told you that. I forgot all about it.
It's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
You can hide your fails and your,
But again, it's the now I know, depending on what I plant in that particular space, it could have the same result, right? Like, I knew it very early on that this was a chance that this wouldn't produce as much as it could.
Right.
Right. But now I have that lesson for that particular space forever.
Yeah. And I think the final category, which apparently we've been going by category again, organic, is feeding. I think, not feeding enough, because we have to remember a lot of these are longevity plants. They need to have seconds, and then you might want to give them a little bit of dessert too. So just stay on your fertilizing game and don't get complacent within your garden. I think that's the message here. You know what I mean? I know, I'm trying to think of what month it is. I'd say around August, late August. I kind of get to a point in my garden where I'm like, I'm over it. It's becoming a headache. It's a lot of work, and just trying to move on from that. And I think by trying to eliminate that, you can increase your success rate dramatically.
Yeah, I think that it takes some time to figure out that formula, right? Unless you're using the exact, recommendations on whatever package that you're using as fertilizer. If you're using a packaged fertilizer, that's definitely a way. I try to skim it a bit just because it's, the expense of it all, so I know I for sure shortchange what do you mean a fourth of a cup? Yeah. What do you mean a half of a cup for this diameter of space? It's taken me a bunch of years to realize it. But my success in the garden, continued success includes, and it's tied to all the things we're talking about. And for sure, fertilizing is one of them. Yeah. Like hard stop.
Yep. So that's all the keys to success in the summer garden. Now, the one that we haven't talked about is the planting portion. And lucky for you, the Planter app is a sponsor of the show. It is available on the Google and Apple Store, which means it's available on your phone and your tablets, but it's also available on your PC. And it is a great way to plan your garden visually. Use a drag and drop interface, play around with it, have multiple plans, see what you like before you get it in the garden. You want to organize plants by watering needs? Easily done. You want to organize your plants by fertilization needs? Easily done. Multiple seasons, it doesn't matter. It's got you covered. Tells you combative and companion planting. They just added the seed box to it. I'm going to have you check it out so you know what the seed box is. They're putting flowers in, hundreds of varieties inside of it. Make sure you use the link below to get yourself a discount. It is a hefty discount on all plans, so get yourself a discount on that. Try it out first if you want, and then get it. It is well worth the money. It's a one-time fee if you get the lifetime membership at a very affordable rate, and it is something that we live by in our gardens. I will be firing it up soon. It's early as it is in the season, so I can start planting my fall garden. And luckily, I can go back to the previous fall garden and see what was in what spot and rotate my crops accordingly. And if there's anything that's combative, I can just look right in the app and it'll tell me what it is. Generally, it's pests, which is good to know because then I can figure out my treatments ahead of time. So check out the Planter app. That's the Planter app, and it's available on your Google and Apple stores.
I highly encourage you, even if you have your garden already planted, even if you, planned, and even if you have it planted, capture within the Planter app what the garden looks like in 2024, this year, right? You're going to benefit from that when you use it to plan, PLAN, your garden next year. That's probably, I was doing a video this weekend, and there were like 3 spaces where I was like, hold on, guys, let me pull up. Like, I think I know what I plan to plant here. Let me pull this up. And that alone is worth the membership fee, the lifetime membership fee in my mind. Yeah. But now knowing that I can go back to next year and add it. And shout out to Peter. I think maybe the note section is probably the best use for this. Like, when did you plant it out? That's something that I keep coming across, like, in my kind of garden interactions. Like, all right, my peppers went in on this date this year, but last year, when was it? Again, trying to do that juggle of what's the best planting date for me in my area, the size of certain plants when they go out. Oh, don't worry, I put these out and they were 3 inches tall, on May the 15th, but it was fine, right? So I am a fan. I do believe that the Backyard Gardens views on the Planter app represent my own.
There you go. There you go. All right, so now it's time for the listener of the day. My wife keeps calling me. I hope she's okay. And unfortunately, my computer moved it when we were talking, so I have to find it again. But I'll find it.
That's okay. For the first time in Backyard Gardens podcast history, you told me the question. Well, the second time.
I did, but I want to get the names for you. Okay. For you. Anyways.
Was this on the Facebook page?
Yeah, I believe it was, because I was looking for a different one that I couldn't find. I got it. Okay. Danica writes, and this is on the Backyard Gardens Community Garden Facebook page. Feel free to join. Question. Well, hold on. First of all, go ahead, Batavia.
Hey, Danica.
Sorry. Had to. Says, question. About when you buy transplants and there are 2 plants in 1 seed cell, what do you guys do? There are 3 options that I rotate through. 1, plant the whole cell in the ground and do not disturb the roots. 2, pull them apart and plant them with proper spacing. Or 3, cut the weaker plant at the soil level and don't crowd the stronger one. I'm not sure which one is best. What do you think?
You only told me the top of this question.
I know.
You always want to try to hold back on something.
I gotta keep it spicy. You know what I mean? You want me to go?
Yeah, you go.
So, I use a combination of all 3. No surprise there, probably. It depends on what the plant is. So, if it's like lettuce and the weather's right, then I will separate them. If it's something, let's say a tomato, I will plant the whole cell, and then I would wait and cut whichever one is the weaker one. I'd wait a week or 2, wait to see some growth, and do something like that. So I use multiple parts of them. I typically do not just put it in the ground, and I haven't bought and it doesn't matter if you buy transplants or if you're planting your own transplant. So let's make sure that's very clear. But I do not usually put them in the ground and then immediately cut them. I have to make sure that I go back. So that's how I handle that. It is not a whole lot now that I will pull them apart, but that's also because I'm starting my own seed and it's significantly cheaper. If I was buying them, and when I was buying them, I would separate most plants. I would tease them apart very gently and do it. But now it's a little bit different story.
I was talking about looking for, as a part of buying transplants, seed sales that have multiples in. And most times, if I'm buying kind of transplants, I'm going to be buying like a 4-pack or a 6-pack. If you haven't noticed, some of these garden centers have dropped down from 6-packs as a standard to 4-packs. Mm-hmm. So that's the whole thing now. But I actually look for it. Now, the key, because obviously they have the larger, just the singular plants that they sell. But the key with the 6-packs or the 4-packs is that's such a small sale for a single plant. Based on the size you probably are buying it at, let alone a multiple plants, doubles. Someone commented on a video when I was talking about this, and he said, I always look for doubles for my troubles. And I love that so much. I'm going to forever refer to it as that. I never, ever, ever plant the 2 plants together. Unless, I haven't bought basil plants in a long, long time, but unless it's something like that, I'm always going to try to separate it. What sometimes happens is when I used to buy transplants much more often, I'd have a lot of things on my back porch and some things just didn't make it into the garden, right? So in that case, it could be, I actually got 2 for the price of 1, but only 1 is healthy enough to plant out. So in that case, I'm discarding the unhealthy looking one, right? By the time I get to the point of planting it. I had some oregano last year. Those kinds of herbs and things, they pack a bunch in. And I intentionally wanted to separate them out to create kind of, these different planting spots. And that thing was so root bound. And when you said, gently teasing it apart, I had to I was very close to getting some scissors. It was just that bad. And the oregano did fine. Some plants are much more forgiving than others. But I think that I am almost always going to try to separate it gently, as young Ben said, and then plant them both out. Every now and again, if they're really young, I'll separate them, plant the one, and then put, more soil in that pot for the second. And that's more like if you're doing just a singular, pot.
Yeah, and I want to say this. If you get a plant that's root bound and you were like, look, I'm going to cut the roots. For a lot of plants, especially a perennial plant, it's not a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. What that does is when, let's say you pull it up and it's really, really root bound, you can cut the bottom quarter of the roots off. And what that will actually do is it will encourage the plant to create a finer feeder roots, and so that it will be able to uptake more nutrients. So that's not necessarily a bad thing if you can't tease them apart. Now, don't go, and it's different for all plants. Like for like tomatoes and stuff, you really don't want to do that. It doesn't really work out well. But for some things like the oregano and stuff, it may not be the end of the world. So just remember that if the roots break, is really what I'm getting to, it's okay. They will regrow roots. That's that's the design of the plant, and it will actually help it. Now, for like food crops and stuff like that, I don't really recommend it. For trees and stuff, it definitely works. Bushes and whatnot, but it is something that will help the plant in the long run. And again, with oregano, for example, you're not harvesting an oregano fruit. You're just taking the leaves, so it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and I, just to make sure that I clarify this bit, I am never buying a root-bound plant from the store. Yeah. That oregano I picked up from the store, and it had been sitting outside for weeks and weeks and weeks.
It was in the container, probably laying on its side, growing upwards, bent over.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually check for transplants that I'm buying. I check to make sure they're not root-bound. Or at least that it doesn't appear that they're root bound. I'm not going to buy the problem that I then have to fix.
So there you go, everybody. By the time you got through this episode, you have an entire key ring filled with keys to get successful in the container garden, in your summer garden. Why you roll your eyes at me? I thought it was clever. I liked it.
I immediately thought you're transitioning into that dad. And we're going to start to hear dad jokes.
Oh, yeah. You want me to start opening the show with dad jokes again?
No, I never did, and I never will.
It was painful. Listening back to it, it was horrible. That was the dark days of the Backyard Gardens podcast. But we're through those, and now it's bright. And everybody, we just hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. You come buy some seeds because guess what? We're putting in some fall seeds. We got a whole rack of seeds for fall to go in. Those should be live very soon, so check that out. Use the code. And everybody have a fantastic day. And remember, we did one thing today, and we're going to continue to do it. We're going to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at patreon.com/backyardgardens, or you can be an Apple subscriber, and in both of those, you'll get an extra episode every month. You can also make a one-time PayPal donation with the link below, and you can get all kinds of gardening gear like t-shirts and mugs and cups from the link below at Teespring, and we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.